A middle-aged couple with two beautiful daughters decided to try one last time for the son they always wanted. Soon the wife became pregnant and 9 months later delivered a baby boy. The joyful father rushed to the nursery to see his new son, but was horrified to find an incredibly ugly baby. He went to his wife and said, "I cannot possibly be the father of that hideous child. Look at the two beautiful daughters I fathered." When his wife blushed, he became suspicious and demanded, "Have you been fooling around on me?" His wife confessed, "Not this time." Boss, shouting, "Johnny, come to my office right now." Johnny, "Yes, sir." Boss, "Little Johnny, I saw you arguing with the customer who just left. I have told you before that the customer is always right. Do you understand me?" Johnny, "Yes, sir, the customer is always right." Boss, "So what were you arguing about with that customer?" Johnny, "He said my boss is stupid and an idiot, sir." Boss, "That What did you say to him?" Johnny, "I told him he's right." An older gentleman goes into a restaurant and hears the other patrons discussing the ups and downs of marriage. "Next week, my wife and I will celebrate our 50th anniversary," he tells them. "That's great. What's your secret for a long and happy marriage?" one asks. "Well, you have to do nice things for your wife." "Such as?" "Well, for our 25th anniversary, I took her to Italy." "That is nice. What are you going to do for your 50th?" "I'm going back to visit her." A woman and her husband go to the doctor because the woman is complaining of shortness of breath. After 15 minutes, the woman comes out into the waiting room and says, "Apparently, my problem is that I have a nice cooter." "Excuse me?" says the husband. "That's what the doctor said. My problem is that I have a nice cooter." The husband is a bit angry and goes in to talk to the doctor. "What's this about my wife having a nice cooter? I need a damn good explanation." "That's not what I said," replies the doctor. "I said she has a cute angina." My cousin was in love and wanted to introduce his bride-to-be to his super-critical mother. But in order to get an unbiased opinion, he invited over 3 other female friends as well and didn't tell his mom which one he intended to marry. After the 4 women left, he asked his mother, "Can you guess which one I want to marry?" "The one with short hair." "Yes." "How'd you know?" "Because that's the one I didn't like." A guy walks into a post office one day to see a middle-aged balding man standing at the counter methodically placing love stamps on bright pink envelopes with hearts all over them. He then takes out a perfume bottle and starts spraying scent all over them. His curiosity gets the better of him, and he goes up to the balding man and asks him what he's doing. "I'm sending out 1,000 Valentine's Day cards signed, guess who?" "But why?" asks the man. "I'm a divorce lawyer." A grandmother is giving directions to her grown grandson, who is coming to visit with his wife. "You come to the front door of the apartment complex. I am in apartment 14T. There is a big panel at the door. With your elbow push button, 14T. I will buzz you in. Come inside, the elevator is on the right. Get in, and with your elbow hit 14. When you get out, I am on the left. With your elbow, hit my doorbell. Grandma, don't worry. I know my way. But why am I hitting all these buttons with my elbow? Are you coming empty-handed? Joe had just moved into a new apartment in New York and was in the lobby, putting his name in his mailbox. As he was finishing up, an attractive young woman stepped out of the apartment next to the mailboxes dressed in a robe. Joe smiled at her and she started a conversation. As they talked, her robe slipped open, revealing that she had nothing underneath. Poor Joe began to sweat, trying desperately to keep eye contact and maintain his composure. After a few moments, she placed her hand on his arm and whispered, "Let's go into my apartment. I hear someone coming." Without hesitation, Joe followed her into the apartment. As soon as the door closed, she leaned against it, letting her robe fall completely to the floor. Standing nude, she purred, "What would you say is my best feature?" Joe, clearly flustered and embarrassed, stammered, cleared his throat, and finally squeaked out, "Oh, it's got to be your ears." She was shocked. "My ears? Look at these They're full, firm, and all natural. My buns are tight. My skin is flawless. Why on earth would you say my ears are my best feature?" Joe, still nervous and red-faced, cleared his throat again and stammered, "Outside, when you said you heard someone coming, that was me." It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and the receptionist at a posh hotel was just dozing off when a little old lady came running towards her, screaming, "Please come quickly," she yelled. "I just saw a man outside my window." The receptionist immediately rushed up to the old lady's room. "Where is he?" asked the receptionist. "He's over there," replied the little old lady, pointing to an apartment building opposite the hotel. The receptionist looked over and saw a man with no shirt on moving around his apartment. "It's probably just a man getting ready to go to bed," she said reassuringly. "And how do you know he's naked? You can only see him from the waist up." "The dresser, honey," screamed the old lady. "Try standing on the dresser." Little Johnny's mother was unsure if her son had been paying attention in Sunday school. When they got home, she asked, "What did you learn today?" He replied that they had learned about the story of Joanna and the whale. Curious, she asked him to explain further. Johnny recounted. "Joanna lived in Miami. One day she went deep sea fishing in the Bermuda Triangle, and it got really stormy. The charter boat captain freaked out and threw her overboard because her line got tangled with a really big fish. At this point, his mom put her hands on her hips, gave him a stern look and said, 'Go on.' Johnny continued, 'It wasn't a fish at all. It was actually a CIA submarine. The captain took her to Cuba and told her to warn Castro to behave, or Uncle Sam would drone him. Castro agreed, and everyone lived happily ever after.' Totally flabbergasted, his mom asked, 'Is that really the story you were taught?' Johnny looked down at the floor, shuffled his feet, and finally confessed, 'Not exactly, but if I told you the preacher's story, you wouldn't believe it.' A fierce argument broke out between a husband and wife one day, and the tension in the house was thick. The mother-in-law, who had been observing the situation, noticed a broken pot in the kitchen and couldn't help but ask, 'How did this pot break?' The daughter-in-law, trying to keep her cool, replied, 'Mother, we had a fight.' The mother-in-law wasn't satisfied with that explanation and asked further, 'But how does a fight lead to a broken pot?' Blushing slightly and hesitating, the daughter-in-law finally responded, 'Well, mother, we made up afterward.' The mother-in-law then noticed that even the bed in the bedroom seemed to have taken some damage and asked, "And how did the bed break?" With an even deeper blush, the daughter-in-law shyly replied, "Mother, that happened when we reconciled." A blonde lady had failed the written driving test 4 times. On her 5th attempt, she was determined to pass. However, she encountered the same question. You are driving at 100 miles per hour. On your right is a wall, and on your left is a cliff. On the road, you see an old man and a young man. What will you hit? Frustrated, the woman walked up to the examiner and said, "I've answered this question in every way possible. Wall, cliff, old man, and young man. Yet I failed all 4 times. How is this possible? What am I supposed to hit?" The examiner smiled and replied, "The brakes." A man sat on the edge of the bed, watching his wife as she gazed at herself in the mirror. With her birthday approaching, he asked gently, "What would you like for your birthday?" Still staring at her reflection, she replied, "I'd like to be 12 again." On the morning of her birthday, he was up bright and early, ready to make her wish come true. He prepared her a big bowl of Cocoa Pops and whisked her away to Alton Towers for a day of fun. What a day it turned out to be! He took her on every thrilling ride in the park. The Death Slide, the Corkscrew, the Wall of Fear, and the Screaming Monster roller coaster. She screamed, laughed, and endured hours of dizzying excitement until they finally stumbled out of the park, her head spinning and stomach churning. But he wasn't done yet. Next, he treated her to a happy meal at McDonald's, complete with extra fries and a chocolate shake. Then they headed to the cinema, indulging in popcorn, a jumbo cola, and her favourite sweets, M&Ms. Exhausted but smiling, she finally wobbled home with him and collapsed into bed. As she lay there, utterly spent, her husband leaned over, grinning ear to ear. "So," he asked lovingly, "how did it feel to be 12 again?" Her eyes fluttered open, and her expression shifted from tired to annoyed. "I meant my dress size, you idiot!" One morning, a husband returns to the cabin after several hours of fishing and decides to take a nap. Although not familiar with the lake, the wife decides to take the boat out since it is such a beautiful day. She motors out a short distance, anchors, and reads her book. Along comes a game warden in his boat. He pulls up alongside the woman and says, "Good morning, ma'am. What are you doing?" "Reading a book," she replies, thinking, "Isn't that obvious?" "You're in a restricted fishing area," he informs her. "I'm sorry, officer, but I'm not fishing. I'm reading." "Yes, but you have all the equipment. I'll have to write you up a ticket." "For reading a book," she replies. "You're in a restricted fishing area," he informs her again. "But officer, I'm not fishing, I'm reading." "Yes, but you have all the equipment. Sure, well, for all I know, you could start at any moment. I'll have to write you up a ticket and you'll have to pay a fine." "If you do that, I'll have to charge you assault," says the woman. "But I haven't even touched you," says the game warden. "That's true, but you have all the equipment. For all I know, you could start at any moment." "Have a nice day, ma'am." And he immediately departed. A man went to visit his doctor. "Doc, my arm hurts bad. Can you check it out, please?" the man pleads. The doctor rolls up the man's sleeve and suddenly hears the arm talk. "Hello, doctor," says the arm. "Could you lend me $20, please? I'm desperate." "Aha," says the doctor. "I see the problem. Your arm is broke." An elderly lady had 3 grown-up sons who each gave her a gift for her milestone birthday. The first son, who had become very successful, bought his mother a beautiful, spacious house. The second son gifted her a fabulous, luxurious car. The third son, knowing his devout mother's deep faith, searched tirelessly for the perfect gift. He eventually found an extremely rare parrot in Madagascar that could recite the entire Bible and explain all of its prophecies. Although the parrot was incredibly expensive, he decided to sell his house and car to purchase it for his beloved mother. Sometime later, the old lady wrote letters to her 3 sons. To the first son, she wrote, "Thank you so much for the lovely big house. It was very kind of you, but it's too large for me. I hope you don't mind if I sell it and buy a bungalow instead." To the second son, she wrote a similar letter, saying the car was too big and she would exchange it for something smaller. To the third son, she wrote, "Ah, you knew what was closest to my heart. Thank you so much for the chicken. It was delicious." Mary was having a tough day and had stretched herself out on the couch to do a bit of what she thought to be well-deserved complaining and self-pitying. She moaned to her mom and her younger brother, "Nobody loves me. The whole world hates me." Her brother was busily occupied playing a game, hardly looked up at her, and passed on this encouraging word. "That's not true, Mary. Some people don't even know you." A magician worked on a cruise ship, and the audience was different each week, so the magician did the same tricks over and over again. There was only one problem. The captain's parrot saw the shows each week and began to understand how the magician did every trick. Once he understood, he started shouting in the middle of the show, "Look, it's not the same hat!" Or, "Look, he's hiding the flowers under the table!" Or, "Hey, why are all the cards the ace of spades?" The magician was furious, but couldn't do anything. It was, after all, the captain's parrot. Then, one stormy night on the Pacific, the ship unfortunately sank, drowning almost all who were on board. The magician luckily found himself on a piece of wood, floating in the middle of the sea, as fate would have it, with the parrot. They stared at each other with hatred, but did not utter a word. This went on for a day, and then 2 days, and then 3 days. Finally, on the 4th day, the parrot could not hold back any longer. "Okay, I give up. Where's the damn ship?" A male mosquito to its wife, "Darling, I will hunt a lion for you." Female mosquito, "Okay, fine, now go to sleep." Male mosquito, "I will bite an elephant and bring his blood for you." Female mosquito, "Sure love, go to sleep." Male mosquito, "I will drive you around Paris in a Mercedes." Female mosquito, Okay, go to sleep." Male mosquito, "You don't trust me? I will get you a 100 GMS gold chain." Female mosquito, "You idiot, go to sleep." Male mosquito, "Honey, I'll do anything for you." Female mosquito, "You silly. How many times have I told you not to come home after biting a politician?" A woman went to a pet shop and immediately spotted a large, beautiful parrot with a sign on its cage that said £50. "Why so little?" she asked the pet store owner. The owner replied, "Look, I should tell you first that this bird used to live in a house of prostitution, and sometimes it says some pretty vulgar stuff." The woman thought about it, but decided she had to have the bird anyway. She took it home, hung the bird's cage in her living room, and waited for it to say something. The bird looked around the room, then at her, and said, "New house, new madam." The woman was a bit shocked at the implication, but thought, that's really not so bad. When her two teenage daughters returned from school, the bird saw them and said, "New house, new madam, new girls." The girls and the woman were a bit offended, but then started laughing, considering the bird's previous environment. Moments later, the woman's husband, Keith, came home from work. The bird looked at him and said, "Hi, Keith." One of Sigmund Freud's early patients rushed out into an Austrian afternoon on her way to meet her best friend at a coffee house. Over cappuccino and Viennese pastries, she suddenly burst out crying. Her friend begged her to share what was wrong. "Oh, it's just terrible," she wailed. "Today the doctor told me I'm in love with my father. And you know, he's a married man." The computer in my high school classroom was acting up. After watching me struggle with it, a student explained that my hard drive had crashed, so I called it. "Can someone look at my computer?" I asked. "The hard drive crashed." "We can't just send people down on your say-so," said the specialist. "How do you know that's the problem?" "A student told me." "We'll send someone right over." As the bus pulled up to the stop and Melissa's turn came to board, she realized her skirt was too tight to lift her leg high enough for the first step. Slightly embarrassed, she gave the bus driver a quick smile and reached behind herself to unzip it a little, hoping for some slack. She tried to step up but still couldn't. Feeling more self-conscious, she reached behind again, unzipping her skirt a bit more, and tried once more. Yet again, she couldn't make it. With another nervous smile to the driver, she unzipped a little further and made a third attempt, but it was still no use. At this point, a large bodybuilder standing behind her effortlessly picked her up by the waist and gently placed her on the bus step. Outraged, she turned to him and shouted, "How dare you touch me? I don't even know you." The bodybuilder smiled and drawled, "Well, ma'am, normally I'd agree. But after you unzipped my fly 3 times, I figured we were friends." A woman decided to treat herself to a luxurious stay at a nice hotel for her 70th birthday. The next morning, when she checked out, the desk clerk presented her with a bill for $250. She was taken aback and asked why the charge was so high, saying, "I agree, it's a nice hotel, but the rooms aren't worth $250 for just an overnight stay. I didn't even have breakfast." The clerk explained that the $250 was the standard rate and included breakfast if she had wanted it. Dissatisfied, she requested to speak with the manager. The manager, who had been informed of the situation, calmly explained, "This hotel has an Olympic-sized pool and a large conference center available for guests." "But I didn't use them," she retorted. "Well, they are here, and you could have," he replied. He continued to list the amenities, including the in-hotel shows, featuring top entertainers from around the world. Each time, the woman responded with, "But I didn't use it." And the manager would simply say, "Well, we have them, and you could have." After a lengthy discussion with the manager standing firm, the woman decided to settle the bill. She wrote a check and handed it to him. The manager, upon looking at the check, was surprised. "But madam, this check is only for $50, he said. "That's right," she replied. "I charged you $200 for sleeping with me." "But I didn't," he exclaimed. "Well, too bad, I was here, and you could have," she retorted. A farmer took his truck in for repairs, but since the mechanics couldn't get to it while he waited, he decided to walk home since it wasn't far. On his way, he stopped at the hardware store to buy a bucket and a gallon of paint. He then went to the feed store and picked up a couple of chickens and a goose. Struggling with all his purchases, he was trying to figure out how to carry everything when a little old lady approached him. "Excuse me," she said, "I'm lost. Can you tell me how to get to 1603 Mockingbird Lane?" The farmer replied, "Actually, my farm is close to that address. I'd be happy to walk you there, but I can't seem to manage all this stuff." "Why don't you put the can of paint in the bucket?" the old lady suggested. "Carry the bucket in one hand, put a chicken under each arm, and hold the goose in your other hand." "Thanks a lot," the farmer said. And together they set off. On their way, the farmer suggested, "Let's take a shortcut down this alley. We'll get there faster." The little old lady eyed him warily and said, "I'm a lonely widow without anyone to protect me. How do I know you won't take advantage of me in the alley?" The farmer was taken aback. "Lady, I'm carrying a bucket, a gallon of paint, 2 chickens and a goose. How could I possibly do anything like that?" The old lady replied, "Well, if you were inclined to do something like that, you'd set the goose down, cover it with the bucket, put the paint on top of the bucket, and I would hold the chickens." Junior had just received his brand new driver's license. To celebrate, the whole family trooped out to the driveway and climbed into the car for his inaugural drive. Dad immediately headed to the back seat, directly behind the newly minted driver. "I'll bet you're back there to get a change of scenery after all those months of sitting in the front passenger seat, teaching me how to drive," said the beaming boy to his old man. "Nope," came Dad's reply. "I'm gonna sit back here and kick the back of your seat while you drive, just like you've been doing to me for 16 years. So the new office manager is going around the offices checking on the employees and showing he is now in charge. He turns a corner and sees a young guy leaning with his back against the wall and hands in pockets. The new manager decides that this is an ideal opportunity for him to exert himself and show the other employees he means business. He approaches the young guy and says, "How much do you earn a day?" The young guy replies, "About £30, £50 a day, I guess." The manager pulls out his wallet, takes £200 out and hands it to the young man. "Here," he says, "take this. Leave and do not come back." The young guy takes the money, shrugs his shoulders and says, "Okay," then leaves. The manager is standing in the corridor feeling quite proud of himself, having shown the rest of the staff he won't be messed about with. The supplies manager comes by, looks around and then asks the manager, "Have you seen a young guy around here?" The manager smirks and replies, "Why?" The supply manager says, "Well, he is a FedEx delivery guy, and I asked him to wait here for me." A man was walking on the beach when he found a magic lamp. He rubbed it, and a genie appeared. The genie said, "You've released me, but this is the 4th time this month, and I'm getting a little tired of granting wishes. So forget about 3. You only get 1 wish." The man thought for a minute and said, "I've always wanted to go to Hawaii, but I'm afraid of flying, and I get seasick. Could you build me a bridge to Hawaii?" The genie laughed and said, "That's impossible. Do you know how long that bridge would be? It's way too difficult." The man said, "Okay, I'll think of something else." Finally, he said, "I've been married and divorced a few times. My wives always told me I didn't understand them. I wish I could know what women are thinking and feeling." The genie replied, "So, do you want that bridge to be 2 lanes or 4? A New York attorney representing a wealthy art collector called his client and said to him, "Saul, I have some good news and I have some bad news." The art collector replied, "I've had an awful day. Let's hear the good news first." The attorney said, "Well, I met with your wife today, and she informed me that she invested $5,000 in 2 pictures that she thinks will bring a minimum of $15, 20 million. I think she could be right." Saul replied enthusiastically, "Well done. My wife is a brilliant businesswoman. You've just made my day. Now I know I can handle the bad news. What is it?" The attorney replied, "The pictures are of you with your secretary.